Welcome to the show. My name's Luke, and I'm joined today by Alan, the Chinese Disappointment. Lou, Alan, welcome.
How's it going?
Well, since I was a little uncomfortable to use your fight nickname, I know it's a joke, I think, among your friends. So how did you come up with that fight nickname? Because it is one of the more unique ones.
It's a long-winded story, but basically, I was supposed to be a doctor, and here I am. That's essentially why.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. So expectations from your family was a little bit different than fighter.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, well that makes sense. All right, that makes sense. Well, speaking of you being a fighter, I had the privilege and pleasure to sit cage side April 6th of 20, I think it would have been 2019,
Yeah.
And watch your MMA debut and then interview you as the winner. So that was great. Now you've had one fight since then.
Yeah.
And you're 2-0 and you're undefeated. So let's kind of jump backwards and say, what was your debut fight like for you? And then what was the second fight like for you? Kind of bring us through those two fights, because you're a young, talented, very athletic fighter with a lot of potential. So let's kind of go backwards a little bit.
I appreciate that. So basically debut, it was so I actually was not able to really fully enjoy that experience because that morning of the fight I woke up like extremely sick, and then so everything was kind of on autopilot. I was just kind of like trying to stay afloat leading up to that fight, just trying to keep my feet, like just keep checking my temperature, keep seeing. And as it got later on during the day, my temperature went up, and then by the time I was leaving for the venue, I was at like a 102 fever. So like I get in the locker room, I'm in the locker room like trying to get warm. They're trying to get me to pick up the pace on the mitts, and I'm like dizzy, and I had like the fever sweats, so I was already warm.
Yeah.
Wow. But and then like the win was great. Everything was great. But as soon as I got out of the cage, like then my stomach was killing me. Everything was killing me. So I was just like, I just want to get home. So that wasn't super fun, even though I got the win. And then my second fight, that was another experience because like I knew I'd won the fight at the end of the fight. But halfway through the fight, my coaches got kicked out. And they didn't do anything. There was something, it had something to do with the licensing with the athletic commission for West Virginia. But the athletic commissioner for West Virginia was not the best person that I met. And you hear in the video, you hear him kicking them out. And so I was very mad about that. So it's when I like got my hand raised, but the whole time I'm thinking, why did my coaches get kicked out? I was like really pissed. I didn't have my coaches halfway through the fight. So I was just like, that was kind of clouding my mind. I remember going back to the locker room and just like cursing about that, like F this guy, F the commissioner. So like I eventually was able to enjoy that win later on in the night, but like that was a whole experience. But yeah, I mean, basically after both fights, my mind stayed on that same path of this isn't over. I have a lot to work on and I need to get to that next level. So it's not any, I don't want to like sound kind of pessimistic, but it's not anything I take too much pride in because I know I have a lot to work on and I know I need to get to that next level. So.
Well, speaking of the next level, to jump into someone we've had on the show before, and it's also going to be your opponent, Dylan Harnish is 2-0, you're 2-0. Mm-hmm. And in the amateur MMA, it's actually fairly rare to come across amateurs with unbeaten records, just because amateurs typically pick up a loss here and there just because you're learning the process and all that. So not trying to put him out there like some crazy high-level opponent, but what's it like being matched up with somebody who is in some ways the next level of your development, in the sense of you're both 2-0. You both have had enough to know that you're successful, but now you're going to be facing each other. And obviously that's something that's going to repeat as you go in your career.
didn't really play into anything. All I said was find me an opponent, and then I was given a name. I didn't look into him. I just said, yeah, sure. Because I needed, like, quarantine was way too long.
Yeah.
The fights, I didn't like care about the record. I'm not talking trash, but he won one by DQ. So I was just kind of like, okay. And we both only had 2 fights. That's not a very extensive career. And I'm not gonna sit here and hype either of us up. I just know that regardless, I've been in the training room day in and day out with some savages, and even like a huge shout out to the people I train with at Stout, like Jonas, Will, Ty. There's too many people to name. And then especially during quarantine, when everything closed down, Kama was nice enough to let me come in every single day and work with them. Dave Sachs, I continued working with him as well. He helped me sharpen everything, worked on a lot of things with me. So I want to give a huge shout out to those guys at the academy who let me into their gym during quarantine when they weren't supposed to be open. So Kama, DeJesus, Dave, Shako, Patton, all of them. And then guys at the Mat Factory too. I've been in the room with them as well constantly, like Isaac, Fadi, who's fighting tomorrow on UFC Fight Pass.
Yeah.
JP, who's also on the card. Everyone from the Mat Factory. So like I've been in the room with high level people trying to take my head off, and like this fight is not going to be any harder than any of my sparring that I've been doing. So,
well, it sounds, in addition to all of those incredible names, the 3 main gyms, I brought this up before, in the Pittsburgh world of MMA are Stout, like as you mentioned, your home gym, which is Stout, but also the Academy and the Mat Factory. And it's nice to see how Pittsburgh is becoming, like those 3 gyms are starting to have fighters train kind of among all of them, which is hats off to everybody doing that. But you mentioned Jonas, who we've seen fight. He's a heck of a pro fighter, but he always had that expression, records are for DJs. And it kind of sounds like you picked up on that as being one of his sparring guys and being close, because you're not putting a lot of emphasis on the record. You're putting emphasis on the experience. And so which is good. So what are you looking to experience in this fight? What do you want to see out of yourself as an experience?
Well, so from what I've already experienced in the cage, you're a different fighter under the lights. And that's why, like, I didn't study my opponent's fight, because I know he probably performs better in the gym. Like, that's generally what it is with athletes. They perform better in the practice room. And like, even though I won my 2 fights, I was not happy with my performance. And I said that after my last fight. I was like, I easily could have performed way better. I'm not gonna lie, I did freeze up, but even though I dominated the entire fight, I know I'm capable of way more. But it's different because these amateur fights, they're 3 2-minute rounds. That's a total of 6 minutes of fighting, and I'm used to 5-minute sparring rounds, so I have more time to get things going. So I guess what I'm kind of focusing on is just making sure that everything I do in the training room shows the night of the fight when the lights are on, when people are watching. So.
Sure. And it's also a good time to remind everyone that's listening that Pennsylvania has 3 levels of MMA competition: the novice level, the advanced amateur level, and then the pro level. And the advanced amateur level, from what I understand, you have to have 3 amateur fights to go advanced amateur, and you have to have a winning record in those amateur fights. So technically, you already are at that level, in the sense that with 2-0, you will have a winning record regardless after 3 fights. But I don't think this is an advanced fight for you, right? This is still your last novice, most likely. So, and you bring up a good point, because there are differences that happen when you're fighting. And I think that's one of the advantages. Hats off to Pennsylvania, I think, for having levels in MMA, just because it gives people like you and anybody who's new to the sport to maybe have a couple fights to get them used to it before you're eating elbows, type thing. Speaking of elbows and knees and all those things, how do you train? Because a lot of the guys you mentioned are pros. Yeah. How do they train with you? What do you do and don't do in sparring with Fatty and Jonas, and a lot of those guys are pros, obviously, and they use a different skill set.
So it's everything goes. Everything goes. They especially like when Coleman was fighting during quarantine.
Yeah.
The Jesus had that Bellator fight coming up when he fought Pico,
huge fight. Yeah.
The guy before that also.
The Russian dude. I forget his name.
I didn't know how to pronounce his name.
Just call him Russian dude. Russian dude.
Sure, we'll go with that. But no, they wear knee pads and elbow pads, so it's cool. But and I guess, you know, they're not trying to hurt me, but it's like, if they're just like, if we knee you in the face, we knee you in the face. And I've been kneed in the face. So it's like, it's everything goes when it's with them. So it's like, that's why I was saying like this, an amateur fight with novice rules, like to be completely real, it's not going to be as hard as sparring.
Sure. Yeah. And that definitely makes sense. I think that's a big difference because there are novice rules in Pennsylvania where you're actually training at a higher, more dangerous type environment. So and so there you go. You also tend to, and this comes from me being cage side, and I'm shocked to hear how ill you were on your debut, because physique wise and conditioning wise, it looks like you have it going on, you know, as far as you're a very lean, good physique. It looks like you have good cardio, even when you were sick in that case. So how much have you been able to keep that going? Because as you mentioned, quarantine and COVID has changed a lot. So where are you as far as the physical stuff goes, the preparation, conditioning? I know Kama's still been conditioning, I'm sure. So I don't know.
The hill sprints, the Sunday hill sprints.
The Sunday hill sprints. Those look fun. I like looking at them on Facebook, but I don't think I'd like them in real life. So.
No, I mean, I don't really like them that much. But the whole physique means nothing. I could fight. I've gotten definitely gotten beat up a lot in the room by people who don't look like me. So, I mean, that means nothing. I don't know why I look like this. Like, I'm just going to be completely honest. People ask me about my diet. People ask me what I do. It's just, I don't know. Don't ask me, but
you're young, right? Yeah. You're in your early 20s and you got great genes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to, because you look like you put a lot of effort in, but it is humility to say that, hey, you know, it's not like you're going out of your way to try to get a physique.
Right.
Particularly, you know.
Right. So. But as far as cardio and everything, like if anything during quarantine, I trained harder than ever. I think I just went, I definitely did overtrain. Literally every single coach from Stout, the academy, and Matt Factory were like, you got to chill out. You got to train less. So it's like, so I'm not, what I was worried about before going into this fight was more like pulling back a little bit, like taking a little less damage, not going as hard as before. And not on top of like training with all these high level gyms, I have pit wrestlers that I work with that help me with my wrestling, very high level wrestlers. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to Jake Wenzel and Kellen Stout. They helped me a lot. And so I was just constantly in the room no matter what during quarantine. So cardio, everything's there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a big point. You know, you mentioned the 3 2-minute rounds, and obviously that's the smallest amount of time an MMA fight will pretty much ever have, given the fact that they go up to 3 5s and eventually 5 5s at the more competitive or more championship level. But with having 2 decisions, and I bring this up because I think there is something to be said, because it's a 6-minute fight, getting those 6 minutes in as an amateur can make a big difference, because you're talking 1 minute longer than one pro round. So I think what sometimes happens in amateurs, and hats off to amateurs. I coached an amateur once. We called him 24-second Chuck, because his first debut fight, he knocked the guy out in 24 seconds. I mean, that's pretty impressive. The challenge with being an amateur and having your entire fight career be 24 seconds long is there's not a lot to improve or work on. So
Yeah.
out of those 12 minutes that you've had, that gives you an opportunity to look at kind of some of your strengths and weaknesses in live competition. And I know you said about not looking so much at your opponents, which makes sense at this level. Amateur fighters are changing on time, but how much do you think back over those fights and kind of analyze those 12 minutes for you?
When I think back, I kind of am confused. No, I'm not confused. I know why I did what I did, but I definitely could have set certain things up better. I definitely could have showcased my striking a little more. Both fights I used wrestling to just dominate the fight because I knew when I kind of grab someone, I can feel if they can handle the pressure or not. And both times when I realized that they were going to have no chance against me on the ground, I figured, all right, that's how I'm going to win this fight. And but I was not a wrestler. I didn't wrestle coming up. I didn't have that kind of athletic background. All my wrestling came from working with pit wrestlers. So I really was one of those guys who just started in MMA. Like I knew I wanted to learn MMA when I was going to Pitt actually. And Pitt actually had a mat room for people to just go work out, hit the bags, do whatever. And striking, I picked up off of like YouTube. And I just like naturally had that footwork and the hand speed and everything. So I was technically a striker. And then I realized like if you get double legged by a high level wrestler, that striking goes out the window. So I just started working with very high level wrestlers. So I definitely think I could have showcased my striking a little more. But that is what I plan on doing in this fight. This fight I plan on just showcasing as much as I can. That's my skill set.
Sure. Well, I think you pointed out something that's important. When MMA fighters have pressure from fans or coaches or whoever to fight a certain way, that doesn't make sense because MMA is about getting wins. Yeah. It's about doing what you need to do. The Ronda Rousey. I think people that understood fighting, that watched her, could see that, her striking wasn't overly developed. But when judo's working against everyone,
right?
I mean, why should somebody put themselves in harm's way if they can win a different way? So it's one of those things where I think it's very wise when you grab somebody that you kind of feel where they are. And if you can take them down, you take them down because it's the best way you can win a fight. Just like in pure boxing or let's say kickboxing, if I see that somebody sees that somebody has an obvious flaw in their game, they're going to take advantage of that. It's the same thing. MMA just tends to get the reputation, some people do, with grapplers. You're looking for the easy way out. Well, grappling's not easy. Grappling's hard. So it's not like you're looking for the easy way out. You're looking for the way you can win. And also, meant as a huge compliment, a very successful MMA fighter who I would still consider to be one of the greatest ever, George St. Pierre, was very similar. There's some differences there, obviously, but similar in the sense that he learned wrestling for MMA, and people still have a hard time believing that he never wrestled in, any of those, developmental wrestling leagues. But I think in a way, what do you think the strength is for you wrestling with pit wrestlers, already knowing you wanted to do MMA? How did that help you integrate wrestling in a way that makes more sense for MMA?
That top pressure and ground and pound, essentially. Like it wasn't like I like found a way to. I'm not a very submission oriented guy. Lately I've been going for more submissions and training and whatnot. Because it's like I said, it's good to sharpen every single thing, add more weapons to the toolbox. So yeah, I've been working on more submissions, getting to the finish, but it's not something. At least not yet. In my later fights, I will start to hunt for that. But as far as right now, I'm going to stick with what instinctually will work for me. But I just loved, I always preferred striking. I loved the footwork, the bounce, the head movement, everything. I loved how all that came naturally for me. But then once I was trash at wrestling because I didn't know how to wrestle. So like I hated it at first, but like I forced myself to keep going until I loved it. And then once I was able to start kind of using that wrestling top pressure, being able to ground and pound people, like that was just really fun. I just love watching people just have this look on their face like they're drowning, like they can't breathe, and they're just like get off of me, but like they can't get me off of them. There was just something about that style, like Habib, like that style is just like it's so humiliating for the other person. So
yeah. That's the smothering. It's interesting when you bring up Habib. Obviously, he possibly retired for his career, although there's already talks he'll come back. But I think other than his last fight, where he clearly was dominating and then decided, which is hats off to him, to pull out some more complicated, kind of a little bit more advanced jiu-jitsu, you know? And it almost looked like he did that for the sake of saying, hey, look, I have this other skill. So like you said, always working skills. But in amateur novice, and I was just talking with somebody the other day, there tends to be this misnomer, oh, there's no ground and pound. Well, now, to be clear, and I'm only saying this because I think you already know this, but to be clear, you are allowed to close fist strikes below the clavicle, which I know is not the head, but you're also allowed knees to the body below the clavicle. And I have seen at least one fight that I know of in the novice amateur get ended because somebody was kneeing his opponent on the ground in the ribs, and it got a TKO from that. So when you mentioned ground and pound, I know it's limited compared to advanced amateur or pro, but you certainly can still use your skills to have a smothering attack, even if it's slightly modified due to the rule set. So I think that's an exciting mindset. Now, you obviously mentioned Habib. How long have you been following him, and when did you kind of think like, okay, that's a guy that's using the type of techniques that you gravitate towards?
Definitely before I ever stepped foot in Stout.
Okay. Wow.
Probably a year before I started going to Stout, I was watching him and kind of realizing like that type of pressure is, there's nothing anyone can do, if that makes sense. And it was kind of like it really was his mindset that I like admired the most, and essentially smash.
Smash.
Yeah. And it was just something about that style that was just like, I'm just so drawn to it. Now, I'm not saying that's the preferred style my preferred style is to mix it all up, to outstrike them on the feet, pressure them, beat them with my speed, and then take them down, humiliate them on the ground for a little bit, let them back up, piece them up. Like, that's what I prefer to do. Mm-hmm. So I would like to kind of mix everything together, essentially, like be the most well-rounded fighter I can and showcase all of that in my fights.
Sure. Well, being a well-rounded fighter is always, I think that kind of is the mandatory in MMA, in the sense that even Habib can punch. I don't think anybody would want to get punched by Habib, even though that's not his forte. And it looked like, obviously he worked a lot with Javier Mendez to work on his striking, and clearly it got better, particularly when he was with Conor, because it actually stood on the feet for a while. And while he wasn't knocking Conor out, he definitely did pretty well on his feet until he could get the fight to the ground. And I think going into this most recent fight against Gaethje, which a lot of people, including myself, thought that Gaethje would have the recipe, which he clearly did not have. But one of the things that you say about mindset, one of the things that Habib said is, he literally said, but in his the way he speaks, he said 100 takedowns. He literally was like, I'll do it until I run out of time. So it was like, he wasn't saying, oh, I'm going to take him down on the first one or two times. What's that mindset like, since you like him so much, that you need to kind of have a tough mindset where even if things aren't going exactly for you, you can keep doing what you need to do to be successful, as opposed to abandoning what would work for you?
It's that like unstoppable force
Sure.
mindset. Like Jonas will always say in practice, like, baby weights, we don't get tired. We don't get tired. But like, I literally like have to tell myself this all the time when I get my ass beat is, yeah, we don't get tired. Like, keep coming. Like, you got to kill me, essentially. That kill or be killed mindset. It almost gives me a high. And it's when I'm at my lowest, when I feel like I'm about to die, like that feeling like I'm about to die just pushes me to keep going. Mm-hmm. It's weird, but that's essentially what I've kind of tried to pull out of Khabib. Obviously, it's very hard to completely adopt that mindset because what Khabib has gone through, the training, he's gone through everything. But you
didn't wrestle a bear when you were a kid? Why not?
No, I didn't. I was wrestling with the violin when I was a kid.
Oh, wrestling with the violin. Well, that builds up a mental capacity. Seriously, there's something to be said for learning something that's challenging. But obviously, I think wrestling a bear. But you bring up a good point. In military training and in MMA, there's something called adversive training. And really what you're talking about is you're training yourself that when you're in an aversive situation, when you're out of breath, when you're feeling like you're going to die, when your body's at sort of fatigue level, where you've actually trained yourself to say, okay, that's where I know I can focus more, I can push more, because I think the challenge is everybody feels the same at some point. It's what you do when you feel that way. And it sounds like you've conditioned yourself to say, when you feel that way, to push forward. One of the training methods, and I'm certainly not like a legendary trainer, but one of the training methods I used to do with my athletes, and they didn't like it until they caught on, is I'd say, hey, you got 3 more, do 3 more. And I would keep doing that for like 10, 20 times, right? Because mentally, as soon as you tell yourself, I only have to do 1 or 2 more, you start taking something off. You start getting, and the first couple times I did it, they're like, no, you said it like 3 more, we were done. I'm like, no, 3 more, 2 more, 5 more. Because there's that mindset, you just have to keep going. As soon as your mind says only blank more, you start shutting down. And it sounds like you already have done that. So you mentioned a lot of people, the training partners and coaches. I don't know if you have sponsors or family members, people, friends that you want to thank as far as your support group, or if you're kind of not sponsored yet, which, if you're not sponsors, sponsor him. But kind of where are you with some of your thank yous and shout outs?
I want to, whoever is watching this will know who they are, but I essentially just want to thank every single person that has been supportive of me chasing after this. And I want to, obviously, like I said, I want to thank everybody that I train with as well. I definitely missed Mike and AJ from Stout. I definitely missed a lot of names. I hope no one gets offended, but there's just so many people. Oh yeah, and people at All American too, like Nick Brown, Ethan Hayes, like they've been pushing me as well, like that. There's a lot of people from this area that I have to thank for putting time and effort into me, because like we all, like there are a lot of fighters in this area that want to make it to the top, that want to make it to the next level. And we, even though it is a one-man sport, we do kind of have to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely something to be said. It is an individual sport, but that individual has a team or an army or a training crew around them. And that goes all the way back to some of the, I think they were called Ludices, but the gladiator schools were one of the first, and I'm sure even before that, but the gladiators thousands of years ago had to train together, even though they often fought alone, because that's the only way you can get better, is to train with people at your level, or as you've been pointing out, even hopefully above your level. Because that, now, just as a kind of a fun question, are you coaching at any of the gyms at Stout? And if you're not, what skill would you most want to teach a new person? So are you coaching? And if not, what would be your like one, man, I'd love to teach a newbie blank skill?
I'm not coaching at Stout. I am gonna be one of the personal trainers at the academy coming up. I'm just on this fight right now, but Dave did put me on as one of the personal trainers at the academy, so I'm looking forward to that. But that's not like a coach or anything. But I will say I would like to do one-on-ones. If and you were asking what skill I would like to teach.
Yeah.
I
mean, if you're doing one-on-ones, you're probably gonna have to teach all the skills. But I mean, as far as something, because here's what I think of: when you teach a beginner a new skill, it's like, what skill could you never get tired of teaching? I guess, like for me, jabs. I love teaching jabs. That you need them. They're kind of get overlooked at times, but like I could teach a person to do a jab 1,000 times, even though it's repetitive, but it's like, okay, I know this is going to help them. So is there a skill that you would like never grow tired of teaching somebody?
Yeah, honestly, it depends on what they're trying to do. They're just trying to do it for fun or whatever. The jab would be the main thing. I would constantly be working on them with finding their distance footwork. If they're trying to fight, I would be beating wrestling into them. First and foremost, I'd be beating wrestling into them, wrestling takedown defense and takedowns, because that dictates where the fight goes. And then from there, we could figure out, okay, are they a better striker though? Or do they prefer to be on the ground? And then I would kind of branch out from there. But yeah.
Well, that's very insightful. And also always important when I interview particularly regional amateur fighters is you and many others, you need income. You got to have money coming in somewhere. So everybody that's listening to this, consider Alan for personal training and then potentially one-on-ones.
Right.
Because
and violin lessons.
And what?
Violin lessons.
Are you actually, I mean, are you still a violinist? Like,
well, I mean, I started at a really early age, like before I can even I could really form super coherent memories. And that, like the way Khabib's dad beat wrestling into him is essentially what it was for me with the violin. So I'm not still consistently playing all the time or anything, but
well, you can teach.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I mean, that is definitely something. I think one of the things now, seriously, I think it's one of those things where any skill you have takes both the mind and doing it. And that's just like MMA. You gotta know it to do it. Violin, you gotta know it. You gotta think differently. They've done a lot of research. As a counselor, I've looked a lot into neuroplasticity, which is the way the brain functions, the way it creates neural pathways in the brain, and music, which I unfortunately do not know, but understanding music, the scales, singing, playing, whatever it is, actually creates, like, your brain has to think a different way, which can be an advantage. So hit Alan the Chinese disappointment up for violin lessons. Why not? But since I already asked you, job-wise, what are you doing to pay the bills? Like,
I'm doing one-on-ones and stuff with people, like my friends outside and stuff.
Okay.
Who want to,
Good. Yeah.
But
good. That's an important thing. And for everybody that's paying you to train them, that's helping somebody pursue their dreams. That's a big part that a lot of people miss in MMA is people do not start off in MMA making money. Oftentimes it takes money. It doesn't make money, so. Yeah. So that's great. Well, okay. I appreciate, do you want to do a prediction or any thoughts on the fight as we wrap up? Any one-liners? I will break you. Anything like that?
No, like I said, it's an amateur MMA fight. It's a hard sparring sessions, but I mean, I predict the win, obviously. But I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm gonna knock him out in the first round. I'm gonna come out absolutely perfect. And I predict a win, and regardless, feet, ground, I'm gonna make him feel like he's drowning. So.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks again. Can't wait to see you in action. Take care.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.